Here, we are going to be discussing the murders of the Idaho Four. Firstly, I'd like to talk about each victim, who they were as a person, and what they were accomplishing in their lives. All 4 victims had attended the University of Idaho, and 3 of the victims had lived in a shared student home close to their campus. Ethan Chapin was born on the 28th of October, 2002 in Seattle and was one of triplets. His 2 other siblings were named Hunter and Maisie. Their family would eventually move to Conway in Idaho, where he attended the Conway School, and then Mount Vernon High School, where he had been on the basketball team and had graduated from there in 2019. Ethan had been an athletic person and played soccer and basketball and loved the outdoors and had a passion for sports. He was also described as funny and liked country music. He majored in sports management and had been 20 years old at the time of his death. Xana Kernodle was born on the 5th of July, 2002 and had grown up in Post Falls, Idaho and had an older sister named Jasmine. She was described as being extremely athletic and loved the outdoors and going to concerts, and spent her life with a positive attitude towards things, and she understood how precious life was. She enjoyed electric dance music. She had majored in marketing at the University of Idaho. She also worked part-time at the restaurant called Mad Greek, where the other victim, Madison Mogan, worked at too. She was 20 years old at the time of her death. Kaylee Goncalves was born on the 8th of June, 2001 and was one of 5 siblings who were raised in Rothrum, Idaho. She was described as competitive, a planner, social, adventurous and a hard worker who was also independent. She had been a senior at the University of Idaho and had majored in general studies and had been considering becoming an elementary school teacher as a possible career option. She was 21 at the time of her death. Madison Mogan was born on the 25th of July, 2001 in Eugene, Oregon and had been an only child. She was raised in Idaho. She has been described as having a huge sense of humor and being really smart, and liked to make TikTok videos. She had been working at a restaurant called the Mad Greek and had majored in marketing at the University of Idaho and made the dean's list every semester. Madison Mogan and Kaylee Goncalves had been best friends, attending the same high school together after convincing their parents to let them go to the same high school as each other before attending the same university as each other. They were so close, they had spent their childhoods together, and spent a lot of time at each other's houses and did everything together. Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin had began dating in the summer of 2022 and were both so happy together, always smiling when around each other, and both loved being outdoors and spending time together. Madison, Xana and Kaylee had been living in a 3-floor house with 6 bedrooms. Each floor of the house contained 2 bedrooms. The home was rented off campus in Moscow, Idaho. They shared the home with 2 other female students from the University of Idaho. On the 12th of November, 2022, all 4 victims had gone out that evening. Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin had gone to a fraternity party at 8 p.m., and both Ethan and Xana returned to the home at 1:45 a.m. Madison and Kaylee had gone out together to a sports bar called the Corner Club from 10 p.m. and left at 1:30 a.m. They were both then captured on a live streaming video called Twitch, outside a food truck located close to Friendship Square. They were seen on the live video talking, smiling and then getting their food from the food truck, then leaving. They both got home at 1:56 a.m. The two other female roommates who lived in that house were home by 1 a.m. and both in their beds. One of them had been in her bed, which was on the second floor. Kaylee had tried calling her ex-boyfriend Jack a total of 6 times between 2:26 a.m. to 2:44 a.m., and then Madison tried calling Jack 3 more times between 2:44 a.m. and 2:52 a.m., and Kaylee tried to call him one last time at 2:52 a.m. All went unanswered. Xana had been awake around 4 a.m. using TikTok and had ordered food through the DoorDash app. One of the roommates in the shared house, who was sleeping in her room on the second floor, had woken up around 4:17 a.m. and had heard a voice that she thinks was Kaylee say, "There's someone here." Soon after, she heard possible crying coming from Xana's room. 50 feet from Xana's bedroom was a security camera which recorded a whimper, a loud thud, and then barking from a dog. The roommate who heard these things opened her bedroom door to see what was happening but saw nothing, so closed her door. Cameras that were outside the home close by heard the sounds of whimpering and a dog barking at 4:17 a.m. She then heard crying coming from Xana's room and a man say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She then opened her door again but saw nothing, so went back in her bedroom. She later opened her door for a third time and saw a figure in black clothing and a mask covering their mouth and nose that was walking towards her. She stood there frozen. Then after he left, she locked herself in her room. She later told investigators she didn't recognize him. He walked past her and left through the glass sliding door. On Sunday the 13th of November, police received a call at 11:58 a.m. to say that there was someone unconscious and needed help. That morning, Ethan Chapin's best friend had gone over to the house that morning and had discovered the bodies. He checked for a pulse on Ethan, then told the roommate to call the police. Police arrived expecting to be dealing with someone unconscious but discovered a crime scene with 4 dead people and walls splattered with blood. The house door was already open and they noticed there were no signs of forced entry. Xana and Ethan's bodies were found in Xana's bedroom on the second floor, and Madison and Kaylee's bodies were found lying with each other in Madison's bed on the third floor of the house. What makes it even sadder is that at the time of the murders, Kaylee Goncalves had only just moved out of the shared house because she had graduated and had a job lined up for her in Texas, so she had only gone there that night for the final time to spend time with her best friend Madison before she was going to leave for Texas. Ethan Chapin had only been there that one night because he was sleeping over with his girlfriend, Xana. Autopsies were conducted on all 4, which showed that they had all been stabbed multiple times, and some may have been asleep when they were attacked.
It's tough. Tough not having here. Stace and I get up and watch the sunrise and drink our coffee and cry in your coffee.
Ethan's parents, Jim and Stacy, speaking out for the first time.
I love to hug him. I'd give anything to just be able to hug him.
You just always make
one
sure
more time.
You just always hug your kid.
Ethan, the eldest of triplets, so full of joy. He spent his last day on this earth with his siblings. The 3 seen here at his sister Maisie's sorority formal before spending time with Xana at his Sigma Chi fraternity and then Xana's home at 1122 King Street, where they were murdered just hours later. That house set to be demolished.
You think stuff like that never happens.
You do. You think it happens to other people, but I'm telling you, if it can happen to us, it can happen to anybody.
Both Maisie and Hunter are now back at school, preparing to graduate without their brother.
At the house, 103 pieces of evidence were collected by detectives and 4,000 pictures were taken. When reviewing security footage, investigators noticed that a white sedan entered the area around 3:29 a.m. and drove past the house 3 times, then returns again at 4:04 a.m. This footage was examined by a forensic examiner who has decades of experience with identifying characteristics of vehicles. He was able to notice that the vehicle was possibly a Hyundai Elantra 2011 to 2016 model. With this information, Moscow Police Department told local law enforcement to keep a lookout for any vehicles that matches this description. The details of this vehicle was not made public until 12 days later, on the 7th of December. Police received over 19,000 tips, and during this time, Kaylee's parents gave information about a possible stalker that Kaylee may have had. They said that Kaylee would call them and say she thought that someone had been following her lately and walking close to her in shops, although this was never reported to police at the time. During this time, the public were told there were no leads, suspects or persons of interest in the case, and police had no idea who the owner of the Hyundai Elantra was.
Murder case.
Police in Moscow, Idaho have zeroed in on a vehicle they're now searching for.
Anthony Pose just to us live with their message to the public. Anthony?
Corey and Dawn, the Moscow Police Department says the detectives want to speak with the occupants of a car that was spotted right near where the fatal stabbings happened. This is a white Hyundai Elantra between model years 2011 through 2013. Police believe the occupants of a vehicle similar to the one in these images right here may have critical information to share regarding the case. Police say in a statement that if anyone knows of or owns a vehicle matching this description, or knows of anyone who may have been driving that vehicle in the days surrounding the November 13th murders, to call their tip line.
We have a job to do, and I said yesterday that we're going to do our job. We're going to do it to the best of our ability, and we owe this to the family, we owe this to the victims, we owe this to our community.
The police chief and other law enforcement officers were also at that home today. They were packing up some of the personal belongings of the victims to return those items to their families as the college town of 25,000 people remains on edge.
Sleepless nights, feeling sick to your stomach, just being left in the dark.
Kaylee Gonzalez's mother recounting the chaos on the day she found out her daughter and Kaylee's best friend Maddie were killed, along with Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin.
We were running around for hours just not knowing what was going on, what happened, because we found out by people calling us. And the sheriff showed up about 3 hours later.
When you saw the sheriff, did you know?
Yes. And I had said that. I said, it's not real until the sheriff pulls up.
Gonzalez says she and her family...
Although the public, for months, believed that there were no leads or suspects in the case, police had known all along who the vehicle belonged to and where that vehicle was, but had kept this information private so they could have time to gather evidence against the suspect. Finally, by the 30th of December, a special emergency response team called CERT used dynamic entry to carry out an arrest on the suspect at his home in Albrightsville in Pennsylvania at 3 a.m., with more than 50 law enforcement taking part in the arrest, as the situation had been classed as high risk. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and felony burglary. When he was arrested, he had been standing in his kitchen wearing shorts and a shirt, and had on examination gloves as he was putting trash into Ziploc bags. The suspect was taken to the Monroe County Correctional Facility in custody and placed on suicide watch.
Break in the investigation into the murders of 4 Idaho college students. A suspect arrested thousands of miles away from the crime scene. ABC's Kana Whitworth is in Moscow, Idaho with the latest on the arrest. Kana, good morning.
Right, Whit, good morning. So 48 days after those gruesome murders, authorities making an arrest. Authorities also saying, though, that in many ways, this is just the beginning. But still, this news allowing the community to take a sigh of relief.
This morning, authorities putting a face to the fear, arresting Bryan Kohberger in connection with the heinous stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger.
Kohberger charged in Idaho with 4 counts of first-degree murder in addition to felony burglary.
The suspect was 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger had been raised in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania and grew up with his 2 older sisters. He worked as a security guard after leaving high school and went on to Northampton Community College and then went to DeSales University, where he got his bachelor's in psychology in 2020 and then received his master's in criminal justice in 2022. Whilst at DeSales University, he became extremely interested in criminal psychology and put up a survey online to recruit criminals for a school study, asking questions on the survey to understand why people have committed crimes and asking people how they prepared to commit their crimes and how the crimes had made them feel.
Back in May, someone using the same name posted on Reddit looking to recruit volunteers for a research project aimed at understanding how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime.
Please ask the public, anyone who knows about this individual, to come forward.
He was studying under a renowned forensic psychologist who was an expert on serial killers. People have speculated that he was trying to gain knowledge on committing crimes and serial killers so he could use that information for his own use. A few months earlier, Bryan Kohberger had applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department. At the time of the murders, he had been at Washington State University studying for a PhD in criminology and working there as a teaching assistant. After the murders, a neighbor had been talking with Bryan and said that Bryan had commented how he doesn't think the police will have any leads on the case as the case, in his opinion, was a crime of passion. People that knew him in university have said he seemed arrogant and cocky, always trying to impress people with his knowledge, and was a show-off who appeared to be full of himself. His students said that in the days after the murders, Bryan was behaving in a different way to his usual self, grading papers with less attention to their work and was more careless in things. People have made claims that he would behave strange and persistent towards women, had been quiet in school as a child and had been bullied at school. It also came out that he would post to a forum when he was a teenager on how isolated and empty he felt, and he lacked sympathy, and he had visual snow syndrome.
Literally days after these murders happened, he brought it up when I saw him in the hallway. He was like, "Oh, did you hear about these murders that happened?" And it was so short after they actually happened, there were barely any news articles out. So there wasn't much that I could have read. So I was like, "Yeah, man, that's crazy. Yeah, of course I've heard about him." And he was like, "Yeah, it seems like they don't have any leads." And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, there's not much about it, there's nothing, I have no details really to say." But yeah, and then he's like, "Yeah, it seems like they think it was a crime of passion." Those were the two things he said, was that they had no leads and they think it was a crime of passion.
Bryan Kohberger appeared in court by the 5th of January, and was told he was facing the death penalty, or life in prison. The state he is in had death by firing squad, so if he is sentenced to death, he may be executed by firing squad.
If I had one or two words to describe Maddie Mae, it would be just an angel, and that she just made me proud.
Ben Mogan speaking about his daughter Madison to ABC News and describing the moment law enforcement told him they'd made an arrest in the case.
And he said, "Ben, this is the day that we've been waiting for."
Ben also describing his emotions while reading the evidence law enforcement say they had gathered against Kohberger.
I broke down and I just cried. I could only take so much of that, and I cried. I still haven't read the rest of it.
The police affidavit claiming investigators believe the 4 college students were killed between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. They say one of the surviving roommates was awake at the time of the murders and told police she witnessed the intruder, seeing a masked man coming toward her before he walked out through a sliding glass door, the roommate then locking her door.
On the 5th of January, the probable cause affidavit was released, containing an analysis of all the evidence linking him to the murders. Police had told law enforcement in the community to look out for matching vehicles. The link between Bryan Kohberger and the vehicle began on the 29th of November. 2022 at 11:58 a.m. when a campus officer from the University of Washington found a Hyundai Elantra in a parking spot in a student parking complex and did a check on the license plates, and saw that the vehicle belonged to Bryan Kohberger, and police then searched his pictures and noticed that he matched the description given of the masked man that had been seen inside of the house. The surviving roommate who had seen the masked man as he had walked past her after she had opened her door, she had described him as a male, around 5'10" or taller, not muscly but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. While awaiting more evidence before his arrest, investigators were carefully tracking his movements. On the 13th of December, Bryan and his father were driving from Washington to Pennsylvania, returning from a pre-planned trip. His journey was being tracked by investigators. He was pulled over in Hancock, Indiana at 10:40 a.m. on I-70 for following a semi-truck too closely, and then pulled over again a few hours later by Indiana State Troopers. There have been claims that these stops were done on purpose at the FBI's request so that it could be seen if Bryan had any defensive wounds on himself. Bryan and his father eventually got to Albrightsville on the 16th, and Bryan was being watched by a surveillance team until he was able to be arrested.
Interesting. Well, it's horrifying because he's going to the university, you know what I mean? So y'all work at the university there?
I actually do work there.
Oh.
PhD in criminal justice.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that incident. Just yesterday, or?
This happened this evening.
About an hour and a half ago. We're still wrapping it up for investigating. I'm not sure there's two shooters because they did shoot somebody. I see.
And then we don't know about that actually. They were apparently like shooting out of the window or something.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So do me a favor and don't follow too close, okay?
Whilst being under surveillance, he was spotted wearing surgical gloves while cleaning the interior and exterior of his car, and then at 4 a.m. he was seen by the surveillance team leaving his home with his rubbish bags and putting them into his neighbor's bin. They were also tasked with getting his DNA so that it could be compared to DNA that had been retrieved from the crime scene, as a knife sheath was left behind at the right side of Madison's body. This knife sheath had been sent off for analysis, and a source of DNA was found on the button snap. Items were taken from the family's rubbish on the 27th of December, and then sent off to the Idaho State Lab. The next day, results showed that the DNA found showed that it was a high percentage chance that the DNA found belonged to the suspect's father. After this, at the end of December, a search warrant allowed them to get hold of his cell phone records. This showed that in June 2022 his cell phone had pinged off of towers near to the victim's home, and his cell phone had been in the location of the house on the night of the murders. At 2:47 a.m. on the night of the murders, his cell phone had stopped connecting to the tower near his home in Pullman, Washington, as if it had been turned off. It then reconnected at 4:48 a.m. to a tower a few miles away from the University of Idaho, and it then tracked him go back to his house in Pullman, Washington. He was pulled over on the 21st of August, only minutes from the victim's house. At 2:53 a.m., he was spotted on CCTV driving towards the crime scene in a white sedan. Then at 3:29 a.m., he was spotted on CCTV driving a white Hyundai Elantra and driving past the house 3 times, then going back to the house a 4th time and possibly tries to park his vehicle. He then drives away from the area at 4:20 a.m., driving really fast. There is also evidence that he may have returned to the house at 9 a.m. on the 13th of November, maybe to check if the bodies had been discovered yet. It has also been alleged that he was messaging one of the victims online. It was alleged that he had visited the Mad Greek restaurant where Madison and Xana had worked at before the murders, when an employee there had claimed she had seen him go there 2 times and order a vegan pizza, although management there have since released a statement to say that the employee's claims were not true. Ultimately, the affidavit says that he was linked to the crime through DNA, cell phone records, and footage of his vehicle.
Victims was found on Bryan Kohberger's phone, and I have confirmed that one of those photos or those photos came from social media. So there were photos on Kohberger's phone of one of the victims. We don't know which victim, but the photos came from social media.
A Washington state judge unsealed documents 49 pages long of what was seized during the search of Bryan's home on the 30th of December. These items were 1 nitrate black glove, 1 Walmart receipt with a Dickies tag, 2 Marshall's receipts, dust container from a Bissell Power Force vacuum, possible strands of hair, 1 Fire TV stick with a cord and plug, 1 possible animal hair, 1 computer tower, 1 collection of a dark red spot, 2 cuttings from an unkissed pillow with a reddish-brown stain. 2 top and bottom mattress cover package separately, both labeled C, each with multiple stains. On the 4th of January, Bryan Kohberger was flown back to Idaho to hear his charges, and in May of 2023, Bryan Kohberger appeared in court and did a silent plea, where he refused to enter his plea. The judge entered a not guilt plea for him, and his trial date has been set for October 2nd. He is facing life in prison or the death penalty, with Idaho being one of the 5 states that has death by firing squads still available. His public defender has stated that Bryan Kohberger is confident that he won't have to serve any jail time.
6 months after police say he stabbed 4 University of Idaho students to death, Bryan Kohberger appeared in a Latah County courtroom, wearing an orange jumpsuit on his thin frame and shackles on his feet.
Okay, we are now on the record in State of Idaho versus Bryan C. Kohberger.
As the judge read the names of the victims, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, some family members there grew emotional, wiping tears from their eyes. Judge John Judge read Kohberger his rights and explained the first-degree murder charges he faces carry a penalty of life in prison or death. Then, the judge asked Kohberger if he was ready to plead.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Meaning, the judge entered a not guilty plea on Kohberger's behalf.
On the 24th of February, 2023, the president of the University of Idaho, C. Scott Green, announced that the house where the murders took place will be demolished. It has also been announced that there are plans for a memorial garden to be opened at the campus of the University of Idaho. Scholarships were also made in Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Ethan Chapin's names.